You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And this is it, folks. Welcome to the Renegade Blitz Playoff Preview Edition, Steelers versus Browns. We're excited to be with you. I'm Ty Polk, joined as always by Chris Ward. And Chris, it's that time of year. It's the playoffs. How you feeling?
Good. I'm looking forward to all the games this weekend, and especially the Steelers won against the Browns on Sunday night.
Absolutely. The first ever Super Wildcard weekend. We got Nickelodeon broadcasting football games. SpongeBob SquarePants is probably going to be on Madden Ultimate Team. I mean, it's a great time of year. The first ever Super Wildcard weekend. Nickelodeon's broadcasting football games. SpongeBob SquarePants might be on Madden Ultimate Team. It's just what a time to be a football fan, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, it's going to be, 3 games on each day. It's going to be just a great weekend for all football fans. The Steelers play on Sunday night. We could see pretty much all the games without having anxiety of worrying about the Steelers coming up or something. They're not playing on Saturday, and then they have the late game on Sunday.
What are you talking about? Steelers fans are always filled with anxiety. It doesn't matter, man. We're back in the tournament. But let's talk about the big stories here. We've had our fun, and it's time to get down to business. So what's the update on the injury front for the Steelers?
Yeah, today they had their first practice of the week, and Terrell Edmonds, who was out for that game against the Browns on Sunday, was a full participant. And Boswell was limited, and he's been out for the last 2 games with that groin injury. And then Tyson Alulu with an ankle, and inside linebacker Vince Williams with a quad injury. They did not practice today, and quarterback Steven Nelson was limited.
Yes, and also on the reserve injured list, Robert Spillane and left guard Matt Filer returned to practice, but they are still on the list. The Steelers are within that 21-day time period to activate Filer and Spillane to the 53-man roster. So it's going to be interesting to see. They have a lot of decisions to make on the offensive line, and of course with Spillane coming back, that would bolster the linebacker depth that really harmed the Steelers during that mini losing streak.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Filer were to come back, do they start Kevin Dotson instead since he's been playing so well? Or he mentioned that on Tuesday during his weekly press conference that, they're going to have some tough decisions, to make just because how well Dotson's been playing. And, Williamson's been doing well as well. But, if Spillane's healthy, once you think that Spillane's kind of been the better player of what you've seen so far.
Absolutely. He seems like he's the future of the linebacking position alongside Devin Bush when he returns next season. So there's a lot of interesting things the Steelers could do in the offseason. We'll talk about the offseason when the offseason shows up. But now it's also time to cover a lot of things. You were mentioning about Mike Tomlin's weekly presser. Ben Roethlisberger's weekly presser was full of intrigue. He's treating this like it could be his final game, and that's what you want to hear if you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah, Roethlisberger pushed the issue of how, important playoff games are, obviously, and how, the opportunities don't always come, so you really got to take advantage of them when they do come.
Yeah, Roethlisberger, along with Brady Breeze, Phillip Rivers, Alex Smith, and Aaron Rodgers, are all at least 37 years old or older, and they will be playing in this playoffs, and it's just insane. All the quarterbacks we've grown up with are fighting for their last chances at a Lombardi, and it's just insane. This is the first time that I can actually say that I feel old. And another thing to talk about is the Steelers in the Hall of Fame circle right now. Alan Faneca and Bill Nunn are currently finalists, the 2021 Hall of Fame class.
Yeah, Faneca's been a finalist. I think this is his 6th time right now being a finalist, and I think he should get in. And we've mentioned before, I think Nunn will be a lock. I think he definitely deserves to get in.
We're going to have our old professor on, Andy Conti, in the future, and I was about ready to campaign for Conti for induction speech. We're going to let the Nunn family decide that. I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be a member of the Nunn family, but if Andy Conti is inducting Bill Nunn into the Hall of Fame, most definitely I'm hitching a ride to Canton.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll get in and definitely deserving, and it's going to be the same weekend with the 2020 class. So Troy Polamalu and Bill Cowher and Donnie Shell. So
yes,
great Steelers weekend. Especially if Faneca gets in. Heinz Ward, I know he wasn't listed or he didn't make it as a finalist, but a lot of Steelers fans think that he should be a Hall of Famer someday. And I want to know what do you think about that?
4 1,000-yard seasons in the seasons that he had 975 yards apiece. He has his own rule, which seems to be like one thing that you kind of need to be in the Hall of Fame. You think of the Mel Blount rule. So why not? I mean, there's a lot of reasons that you could say in there. I think one of the reasons why it's going to be a wait for Heinz Ward is because a lot of the receivers that are higher up on the receiving yards list were his contemporaries in the league. So it's going to be a long wait for Heinz Ward. It's sad to say that. I think that he'll eventually get in there, but I'll put it to you like this, Chris. Earliest I could see Heinz Ward getting into the Hall of Fame is probably our 30s.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely going to be a long wait, but I think he's deserving because when you think about the mid 2000 receivers, I think sometimes he gets a bad rep because I think people think about him later in his career, like that 2011 season when you knew he was done, like he couldn't run anymore. But you look at Heinz Ward in the mid 2000s, like he was one of the best top 5. He was the top 5 receiver, really. I mean, I'll give you like Terrell Owens, Randy Moss were like athletically more gifted than Heinz. But who else would you have there as a top 2000 mid 2000s receiver? Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison. You have those guys too.
Torrey Holt. You're talking about my entire wheelhouse right here, Chris. I mean, I could name you just about everyone.
Johnson was good, but I don't consider Chad Johnson the same kind of as Heinz Ward. Like their stats are similar in some cases, but I thought Heinz was a more consistent player, and he played for a winner with the Steelers and 2 Super Bowl championships.
He's got the accolades. He's got the role. He's got the adoration. Everyone knows him as a blocker. There's many people who will probably try to discredit him because a lot of those blocks that he did were not in today's NFL friendly mold, but his reputation as a blocking wide receiver is what every wide receiver really should do in a running attack. But from Heinz Ward to Heinz Field, the Steelers have re-upped their agreement to have the Heinz Ketchup Company grace their name onto their stadium. And so there's been a lot of talk about this. The deal with Heinz Field was rated as one of the lowest in terms of dollar rates, something along those lines in the NFL. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people wanted to see if there was going to be a renaming. So, Chris, what do you think about this situation?
Yeah, Mike Flory of Pro Football Talk expects a name change after the 2021 season. And he said SoFi is believed to be paying $400 million for its 20-year naming rights deal with the stadium shared by the Rams and Chargers.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what the new name for Heinz Field could be. My betting money is on UPMC getting the naming rights and calling it UPMC Stadium. I also could see that, the Steelers are a national brand. Why not name it Amazon Stadium? The seats are already yellow. It could happen. I want to have no naming rights on the stadium, and they rename it Three Rivers Stadium. Finally, Chris, let's get on to it. What's the betting odds for the Steelers? I heard that they're up 7 on the Browns so far.
It varies, which source, but OddsShark has the Browns as 6-point underdogs against the Steelers currently right now.
The Browns are currently dealing with a ton of COVID situations. They will be without their head coach, but we'll talk more about that with our next guest who covers the Cleveland Browns. And we're joined by Tom Livers, AP sports writer. He covers all the Cleveland sports team. Tom, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Glad to finally catch up with you guys.
Again, it's almost deja vu for Cleveland in the playoffs. They're back in the playoffs for the first time since 2002, facing the Steelers again after their win last week against the Steelers. What's the reaction been around town from the players to the fans?
Well, it's been quite a roller coaster here the last couple of days. Obviously, they get the win over the Steelers' backups, if you will, which was a tough game, but something that I knew was going to happen only because I knew Pittsburgh would be ready, and they wanted nothing more than to wreck Cleveland's plans. But so they qualify for the first time in 20 years, and then they get struck down by COVID a couple of days later. So let's just say the celebration was a little shorter than expected.
And Tommy, speaking of the COVID situation, Stefanski's going to be out this week on Sunday night. What have they been doing to prepare for this game? And is there anyone still eligible to get out of the protocol as far as the players and some of the other coaches? Yeah,
they're still, they're a little bit in lockdown still. So today they were not able to practice on the field. They did everything virtually. They did a virtual walkthrough. And then much like every team has had to do, the Steelers included all year, they did all their meetings virtually. And it's kind of strange how what we think would be abnormal has become so routine for these guys. They basically stay at home until they get done with their meetings, and they head to the facility and they try to get a practice in or a workout in, depending on what day of the week it is. So things are still up in the air in terms of who's going to be available. They were able to get linebacker B.J. Goodson off of the COVID list today, and that's a big deal only because he calls their defensive plays. They put rookie Jacob Phillips into that spot last week against the Steelers, and he did a good job, but you know what? He's a rookie, and he's going to be going against, Big Ben and those other Pittsburgh starters this week. So that's going to be a very different animal for him. So as far as Denzel Ward, their top cornerback, it's probably going to be close to a game time decision because the clock started on him once his positive test came back. And that's going to be just about 10 days once we get to Sunday afternoon. So that one's still a little bit up in the air. And, they're just going to, like every other team, and the Steelers are in this boat as well. They're just going to kind of hold their breath over the next couple of days and hope that there's no more high-risk close contacts, and hope to put the best team they possibly can out there on Sunday night.
Well, in that last game, the Browns had a really good day on the ground. Nick Chubb's 14 carries for 108 yards and a touchdown buoyed them to an 192-yard rushing performance. And lately, the Steelers' run defense has been historically stout, but it seems that they've kind of been a little bit leaky over the past couple weeks. Do you think they'll have a similar performance this week with Watt and Hayward returning to the lineup?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's a great point. I don't know exactly what their game plan is going to be, and it's been interesting the last 2 weeks in that Stefanski has really minimized the number of carries for both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, as if he's trying to save them for the playoffs. So, the game plan has really been to come out and throw the ball as much as they can, try to soften up a D, maybe use a little bit of play action. But we were surprised last week when Chubb was running so well in the first half. I think he had 83 yards midway through the second quarter, that they went away from it. And then they obviously went back to it again in the third quarter to try to control the clock a little bit. And, the biggest problem for the Browns here recently is that their offensive line, which has been one of the strengths all season, has been banged up. Wyatt Teller, their right guard, has been out a couple of games with a sprained ankle. He missed some time earlier this year with a calf strain. Joel Bitonio, their Pro Bowl left guard, is going to be out this week. So they've been moving some bits and pieces in there. And the other problem that the Browns have had, too, is that two of their top backups, Chris Hubbard and Nick Harris, have both suffered season-ending injuries, so they're very depleted up front. Also, when you factor in that last week they barely had any practice time, that lends a little bit itself to that lack of rhythm and the lack of execution that you saw a little bit in the Browns last week in the running game.
And Tom, in your opinion, what are the matchups to look out for in this game, and who do you think needs to have a big game in order for Cleveland to win?
To me, everything starts and ends, Chris, with Baker Mayfield. It's all about him. This is the moment that he's waited for since he was drafted by the Browns with the number 1 pick in 2018. It really hangs on him. A lot of pressure. By far his biggest game as a pro. So I think it's going to be how Baker is able to handle that pressure, whether it's coming from Watt or whoever else on that Pittsburgh front. So it's going to be up to Mayfield to make good decisions. He's been better at that of late. Made some big plays with his legs last week. He had that big 28-yard run, and then obviously the 3-yard sweep there at the end to kind of seal the game. So to me, it begins and ends with Baker Mayfield. And then after that, I think on the defensive side, you got to look at Myles Garrett. Here's a guy who's played at a high level all year. Obviously, he missed a couple of games with the COVID. He's been a game wrecker. He's had huge plays, strip sacks, pressures, whatever the case may be. And he's just not been the same since he came back from the virus. So, I look to Baker on the offensive side and then Myles Garrett defensively as the key for the Browns.
The last time the Browns played in the playoffs was that 2002 wild card game. I was wondering, did you cover that game?
I did. Yeah, that was quite a day. I made the drive over, and I remembered for a couple of reasons. One is that the night before, Ohio State had won the national championship, beating Miami, and I'm a proud Buckeye, so I can kind of remember that weekend pretty vividly. But then that Steelers game was just crazy because, as you guys probably remember, the Browns built a huge lead with Kelly Holcomb at quarterback because Tim Couch had broken his leg the week earlier, and Holcomb was just amazing through about 450 yards or so. Browns had a big lead. Steelers scored 22 points in the fourth quarter and made a great comeback. So, yeah, it's one of those games I'll long remember.
Well, does it feel different this time with Cleveland? They've had a couple winning seasons, that 2002 season, that 2007 season. Does it feel like this Cleveland team is more built to stay compared to those two teams?
Yeah, I would hope so. We've had nothing but change here. If there's been one constant in Cleveland over the last 20 years, it's been change. So I do feel in the new general manager, Andrew Berry, and in Kevin Stefanski, they finally have the right people in place to make this thing go in the right direction. So the other good thing is that it seems like Dee and Jimmy Haslam, the owners, have been really hands off. They also brought in Paul DePodesta. I don't know if you guys remember a couple of years ago. He's a former baseball guy who really needed some time to kind of figure out the NFL. And he seems to have done that. They've made smart moves. They've been smart financially. They finally made good draft picks over the last couple of years. So I think things are in good shape here in Cleveland for once. And then, as I mentioned before, you got to have a franchise quarterback. I mean, the reason the Steelers have been so great for so long is that they've had great quarterbacks, right? I mean, you plug Big Ben in, you can bring in all kinds of different pieces and parts over the years. You make sure you have that quarterback protected, but it's about having that franchise quarterback. And I think there's enough good now in Baker Mayfield's resume to feel like he is the guy going forward.
The Browns finally making the playoffs, the Cavs winning the NBA Finals, and Cleveland and now Cleveland baseball team making it to the World Series. Is this kind of up higher, or you can't beat championship play?
Yeah, this is a Browns town still. It's still a very football crazed area, much like Western PA. I mean, people in Cleveland are no different. They love their football, whether it's peewee or high school or college or pros. And so, seeing the Browns back, being relevant, playing in important games in December and January means a lot to the people in the city. That's not to say that it wasn't a great ride with LeBron. It's not to say that people don't love baseball here, but football is a whole different thing. And to have the Browns back, the unfortunate thing, guys, this year is that, fans have not been able to celebrate like they normally would, right? Because of the pandemic, downtown is essentially shut down. I'm sure it's very similar in Pittsburgh as well. So, you miss those tailgates. You miss the time of seeing people really out and celebrating. And that's why, when they won the game on Sunday, it just felt muted. It was still noisy and there were 12,000 people down there, but you try to picture what downtown would have been and seeing the bars filled up and people honking their horns and all that stuff. It just wasn't there. But that's not to say that people aren't excited about being back in it again this time.
Also, one more thing. What's your prediction for the game?
I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be fairly high scoring. You guys know better than I do that the Browns historically have had a very tough time at Heinz Field. They've lost 17 in a row there. So I could see a game in the upper 20s, low 30s. I think it's going to be difficult for the Browns to get over the top just because of what they're dealing with. I mean, can you imagine a game where, let's look at the Steelers as, for an example, going into the game without Mike Tomlin on the sideline, with a young quarterback, with so many other guys missing. So I think it's a really tough challenge. I think it would have been a tough challenge for the Browns to be at full strength. But I think given all that they've had to deal with, given the emotion of winning last week's game, I think it's going to be tough for them to get back up to that level on Sunday night.
And Tom, are you traveling to Pittsburgh to cover the game, or are you staying at home?
No, I'm going to unfortunately have to stay here. Under normal circumstances, I would be coming in, but because now that there's a restriction on the number of people that can be in the press box, that they've I think they're only allowing one media person, and we've got a good one there in Pittsburgh and Will Graves, and so he'll handle it. The game story from there. I'll help with Zooms, and I'll obviously write anything I have to do from home. That's one crazy thing about during the pandemic. You find that you don't necessarily have to be there as much as you'd love to be at the game and at the press box. You can still get things done from afar.
Yeah, it's been one crazy season just in terms of reporters. We've been talking to a lot of them. We've been talking to play-by-play guys, and it's just a mixed bag. And again, we thank you for coming on to the show. We thank you for all you do. And Chris, do you have anything else?
Yeah, Tom, we really appreciate you making time and coming on the podcast.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I follow you guys on Twitter, and continued good luck. Stay well, stay healthy, and have a great 2021.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Tom Withers, AP sports writer covering the Cleveland teams. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. See you guys.
I'll see you, Tom. Take care.
You too.
All right, and that was Tom Withers, AP sports writer in Cleveland. We thank him again for coming on the show. So, Chris, it's our first ever playoff predictions, wild card round, Steelers versus Browns. I'm interested to hear your take on this game.
I think it should be a good game. The Browns are dealing with a lot with the COVID situation, but I think the Steelers are the better team, and I think they just got to come out and execute their game plan and have Ben throw the ball down the field. And I think the defense should get a lot of sacks on Baker. They had 4, on Sunday, and they didn't even have TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. And the Browns are dealing with some offensive line issues. Batonio's out, who's one of their best offensive linemen, has some backup injuries. So they're going to be, look for Cam Hayward to have a huge game on Sunday night.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be the big boys that missed last week's game against the Browns that are going to be the difference. You say Cam Hayward, I say TJ Watt, because I just think that right now that man's on a roll that can't be stopped right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Browns offensive line can handle him. Of course, we're going to see a lot of holding on TJ Watt, but with more national praise coming on to Alex Highsmith, he was named one of the rookie edge rushers on Pro Football Focus's all-rookie team. It's going to be interesting to see what Highsmith has done, because that spin move has been lethal for a lot of offensive linemen that have been going against him. So I think that TJ Watt will play a role in this game. I think getting a little bit of the pressure off of Highsmith, and we could see the future at outside linebacker for the Steelers have a good game.
Yeah, definitely, he played well on Sunday against Wills, who, first round pick for the Browns out of Alabama. And, we mentioned on the podcast before, like Highsmith came out of Charlotte, which is not a football factory of producing guys to the NFL. So it's just an amazing story. And he really has done it well. He's really done a good job, filling in for Bud. And it should be, there's a lot of interesting matchups in this game. What matchup are you looking forward to the most?
Ben versus the Browns secondary, really. That's one thing. Mason Rudolph had his day out there. And when you look out there and you see if Mason Rudolph can put up 315 yards, and I know that Brown's secondary is depleted, and as Jake Burns said last week, there are a lot of Jags, just another guys out there. But so you look at that and you go, well, again, Mason can do it. It'd be hard-pressed not to say Ben to at least get into the high 300s there if Mason can get into the low 300s.
Yeah, I think they just got to do what they did in the second half against the Colts, and what Rudolph did on Sunday, just throw the ball down the field. They got the receivers to do it. Claypool, Johnson, Juju, even James Washington, just attack that Brown secondary, because they're not, Denzel Ward's a top cornerback, and like Tom mentioned, like he's probably gonna be like close decision there with the whole COVID thing. Their defense, like when we mentioned Jake Burns said, like they don't really have a lot of big names. Like Vernon's out, he got injured and he's out for the year. He was like Achilles injury, and that's huge for them because he had 9 sacks this year. And Myles Garrett hasn't been producing as much as he did earlier in the year, and he's their main guy. And you still gotta worry about him because he could create havoc at any point. But
well, I'll give you my final score prediction for this game. I'm going to say we're going to go 31-20 Steelers.
I'll go 24-17 Steelers. They'll start off slow as usual, I think. It's going to I don't see that changing. I think Ben might be a little bit rusty at the first, but he'll start to heat up and get going maybe like the second quarter, just like how it usually is. And Twitter will be like, all freaking out at that point.
I would agree with that, but also Mason had a pretty good, at least better than average, first drive against the Browns, and I want to believe that Ben Roethlisberger has something to prove, and really this entire Steelers team has something to prove to this league. This is expected to be a game in which they win. It's going to be another one of those games where people are going to discount the Steelers for saying like, oh, it's COVID. And I think this is finally where the Steelers made a statement in Heinz Field in October. So why not make another one in January? It'd be the perfect time for them to do something.
I don't think the players will overlook anybody. I mean, I get that sense of the fans just because the Browns are dealing with COVID situation. Like they struggled beating the Steelers without, a lot of their key starters. And, Stefanski's not going to be on the sideline on Sunday night. So I see the confidence of the fans, but I'm confident, but I kind of have that side of thinking, this is a Steelers playoff game. Like anything could happen. And the Browns have some good players. Nick Chubb could do damage in the run game. And like Tom mentioned during the podcast, that this is a huge game for Baker Mayfield. He really has to, show that he, could be a playoff quarterback.
Absolutely. It's a game that has a lot to prove, but I think just by osmosis of the Browns getting here, I think those will be 2 touchdowns, one by Mayfield, one by Chubb. And the Browns, they feel different. This feels like a different organization. I feel that this is going to be a team that will hang around in the AFC North for the next couple years, and it's going to be really interesting next year and beyond when the Steelers are potentially saying goodbye to Ben Roethlisberger and guys like Burrow are coming up, and of course Lamar Jackson's already here. This is going to be a game that goes a long way in proving that the Browns were correct in making Baker Mayfield their number 1 pick, their franchise quarterback.
Yeah, he has to come through here big. He's going to have to make some key throws, and because I think the Steelers are going to, they have to stop the run here. They can't let Chubb go, because if that happens, the Mayfield just get going on the play action and bootlegs, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I feel that Chubb's still going to have a good game in relative to like what running backs have done in Heinz Field this season. But I do believe that the friendly confines, even with like maybe 5,000 or so people in terms of Steelers fans in attendance, will play a role in here, because home field advantage this is probably the least that home field advantage will probably ever mean in the NFL, unless this is how it's going to be this time next year in the playoffs. But but I still believe that just being in Heinz Field is just going to create a different vibe for the Steelers. But again, this could be the game that changes everything, just like how the loss against the Bengals. You never know.
All right, yeah. Baker he needs to be more than just a game manager. I saw Colin Cowherd mention that on the show, but the home field thing doesn't really play a factor much without the fans. It would have been great to see Heinz Field packed there with a playoff game, but just an unusual year and difficult times right now with the whole pandemic. I'm just glad that they're playing football. Really, there's a lot of sacrifices being made for them to even do that. With the whole, look at Stefanski, he doesn't even know how he got COVID, and he's going to miss the playoff game on Sunday night.
In due time, everything will work out for both franchises in terms of getting fans in the stands. And so this is it. Sunday Night Football, the final game of Super Wildcard Weekend, 8:15 NBC. The Steelers will look to avenge some of their woes in primetime football from the last month against these Cleveland Browns. And that's all for us. For Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. We'll be back hopefully with a recap of a Steelers win. But thank you, as always, for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.